how many times sponsors have said no to auto escalation, it makes my hair curl. Sadly, just as much as there is a high propensity of $1 million rollovers, there's also a high propensity of $100,000 60-year-olds. Now it went from $40,000 a year in the 4% rule to 4. Income in retirement is the thing now, right? That's what everybody, what's my number? What is, it's only $4,000 a year, holy cow, or it's $40,000, I better be really mindful how I spend that.
Welcome to the Tao of Chao podcast, where we will try to find balance and provide a clearer path forward in this uncertain world. Today, my guest is Matthew Mintzer, a veteran of our industry and an expert fiduciary. Matt is the Executive Vice President at Pentegra Retirement Services and leads Pentegra's sales and marketing, strategic development, client services, and operations areas. He joined the organization in 2019, and he has more than 30 years of experience in the retirement industry. Prior to his current role, Matt was a principal at Eyes Up Consulting, a consulting firm. And prior to that, he was the head of advisor retirement business at JP Morgan Asset Management, and that's where I met Matt. And he was also head of retirement business at AllianceBernstein, today called AB, and Putnam Investments. Matt earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in finance from Pennsylvania State University. And here is Matt. Hello, Matt.
It's great to be here.
Thank you for joining me today, and going to talk about something that both of us are, I guess, strongly or passionately about, which is really the Fiduciary Standard. I kind of gave away the entire show.
We're done.
But then we can leave. But reality, it's how that applies to our industry. But before we get into this kind of heavier topic, what I learned from you is about how unique your current firm, who you work with now, in this space. And I thought the story was really interesting because I didn't know about it. So this is not advertising for your firm, but I think it really is relevant.
It's a crazy good story.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind sort of share with us, and I think it will be a great way to get started on that conversation.
Yeah, so on behalf of our council, these are personal views of mine, but I hope they are very much in sync with the organization. And first, Philip, thank you. It's congratulations on all you've been doing in your career too. It's great to be able to share some thoughts with you today. The Pentegra story is crazy. This is our 80th year in business. We're one of the oldest companies in the financial service industry, and we're also probably the oldest fiduciary. We were built in 1943 by the Federal Home Loan Banks to be the fiduciary of their defined benefit plan, which is talk about also kind of ahead of its time. It's also a multiple employer plan, multiple employer defined benefit plan, for which we are an owned asset inside that company, inside that construct. They had the foresight that we shouldn't be the ones reviewing it. We are a completely independent organization with our own board and our own charter and everything else, with a sole purpose of what would become known as 338 from an investment management standpoint, 316 from an administrative standpoint. We are the actuary of the plan, and we do all the asset allocation for it. So when I saw that as a consultant, what the thing that struck me is that the core competency of the organization has been kind of inside that bubble of the Federal Home Loan Banks, and then the broader extension of banks that are members of the Federal Home Loan organization, which is a very big organization. And it struck me that why not take this outside the walls of the banks and bring that fiduciary outcome for which we were built 80 years ago and make it more broadly available with the record-keeping partners and distribution partners that we know so well in the retirement plan industry. And the CEO liked the idea. He said he liked it so much, he needed you to come work here and get that built. So I am now officially what I've always felt that I was, Philip. I'm a fiduciary, and I'm proud of it. And it's so freeing. Don't only think about the client, put the client first. Every time, it's remarkable how that creates a great outcome for everybody. Myself, my family, and my employees, our employees, everybody. It's a great way to go through this part of my career.
So it's not quite conflict-free in the sense I don't think anyone can live in a conflict-free, but we can try to be cognizant of conflicts and how we work that out and to serve solely in the interest of our clients.
Yeah, I mean, we're at that nexus between the social good of saving for retirement and the commercial opportunity of capitalism. And I think we've done a great job as an industry. And I think there's still more that can be done. And I love kind of towing that line as a fiduciary to always put the client's best interest first and figure out how to scale that kind of outcome through all the market segments we have.
So, do you still consider your firm as in the record keeping business, or how do you? If somebody asks you what business are you in, how would you start that conversation?
We're a fiduciary, and we're a fiduciary irrespective of record keeper and distribution partner because we are stewards of the code. So as it comes to 316 more broadly, because that's the misunderstood fiduciary outcome of most plans, or 338 where we're asked, but we know that our advisors primarily provide that service. We've actually can be a 321 to their 338 too, as if they want an additional level of protection. But that's really our core competency. I think we as an organization here at our 80th year figured out that it's time to make a better connection to what is our greatest strength. So when you get to the record keeping portion, and I'll say the participant record keeping business, as opposed to the plan sponsor governance. That's the big differentiation. We're on the plan sponsor governance side. The scale required and the technology required and the ongoing investments required to do it well on the participant side because of technology, primarily the smartphone, right, is not something we can compete with or want to. We love the details inside the plan, getting them right, keeping them right, let a plan sponsor not have to worry about those, or an advisor or a record keeper too, because everybody's busy.
So you think that your firm really have the knowledge and the experience and expertise of the record keeping services. Certainly started your root in the DB space, but on the other hand, you don't need to be in it to provide the kind of service that you're talking about.
Correct. It's the data is being driven by these mighty record keepers. The top 10 are probably 95% market share. We've worked hard to connect with those record keepers because the advisors also tend to correlate highly to those record keepers as well. So that nexus between plan sponsor data and the outcome of the plan and what's driven by the advisor, we're that extra set of eyes and ears on the books, and in many cases actually doing the work as an administrative fiduciary, where we're named inside the plan docs in the 5500.
You are really in the most contemporary aspect of big data, understanding data, data security, and ownership of data, right? I mean, they are all kind of related, and it's very contemporary. I mean, these are issues that we are all struggling with in figuring out what is the best way to farm the data, use the data in a productive and participant-centric way, protecting that data, and understanding the ownership of that data and not to be abusive with that data, which is a fiduciary duty. I'm sure I'm not saying it exactly the way you guys would say it.
No. Well, and I kind of draw the line at the participant connection and the sponsor's responsibility as it relates to the governance of the plan. So we're focused on the governance side, that next step to the participant and what is then done. That is a big deal. And it's one, the plumbing required to get that right is massive, and it's never ending. The biggest firms are spending gobs of money each month on technology, and rightly so, because we're in that environment now where that information has to be instantaneous wherever you are on the planet via your cell phone. And the security that goes into making sure that the bad actors don't get in, which they are never ending in their attempt to do. That's a huge undertaking that's beyond, really beyond our core competency. Let's focus on our strength and the protections that are required at the plan level with documents and everything that goes into making sure these plans are running to the full letter of the law under ERISA. And that's a great place to be because we can do that broadly through now data interactions with these big record keepers and things like Salesforce and sharing across the board with all the partners that we intersect with.
All that is so that can get you to be a better fiduciary and inform the plan sponsor client what to do or what is missing or what needs to be done. So we're going to dig in a little bit about fiduciary first. This will probably date me a little bit, and you probably know this. There used to be a drink called Dr. Pepper, and there was an ad called "He's a pepper, she's a pepper, we are a pepper," whatever. Just everybody's a pepper.
Everybody's a pepper.
And fiduciary becomes everybody's a fiduciary, and it's somewhat meaningless when everybody says, I'm a fiduciary either on the SEC side or on the ERISA side, which we can dig deeper into it. But it's almost like you don't meet anybody who is not. But not everybody really practices in the strictest definition of what a fiduciary is. And it becomes very confusing. And such an important term got diluted so much that a little while people say, well, what difference does it make? Because I can't really tell what that really means. So maybe we should step back instead of being Dr. Pepper, is to say, well, why is fiduciary rule so important under the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974, also known as ERISA? Why is this an important position, you think, or envisioned from the way you interpret it?
Wow, so much in that thought, Philip. I'm not even sure where to begin. So I'll try to keep it really basic because that's kind of how my brain works. As simple as effective. People are busy. And I've seen that consistent, whether they're the biggest companies, and I've worked for the biggest financial service organization, and there's a lot of busy people. And guess what's not on their mind every day? Retirement plan, how it works, the rules of the road, what's responsible, what's expected, what their role as a fiduciary is. Technology did a great thing with daily processing, and it made data information accessible in a very timely basis. That was the big differentiation in the 80s and the 90s, was going to a daily platform as opposed to a monthly or quarterly processing system. That started, and then what was continued with automation through the internet and then smartphones has made it ever present. So the data element of this is really important, but the sponsor themselves, everybody's busy with their day job. Running the retirement plan is not it. Having professionals where that is our core competency and what we do is brings comfort, saves them time, and ultimately, as we've learned, and I think that's been, not to get off track, but one of the big outcomes of COVID is a lot of people realized the time they were spent commuting was not good use of time, and have voted with their feet to say, I'd rather work from home. I can do a really good job from here. Do you trust me or not? I think is another big element that will come into the retirement plan space as well. It already has. So wonderful. I think, people are busy. Time, money, self-interest. Plan sponsors don't wake up on a Thursday morning wanting to worry or think about the retirement plan. They want it. They want it to work well. They want it to be in the best interest of their employees. They want it at a reasonable price. And, they're happy to have professionals to be that steward for them. That's the big takeaway. They love our independence, and not to make this a commercial, but being an independent fiduciary is that, on the hook, literally, in that 5,500 that is always signature ready, but isn't always signed and filed, is, a little deal that's a big deal. So I think having that extra set of eyes and ears of someone who that is the thing they wake up in the morning thinking about, worrying about, is of great comfort to plan sponsors and advisors.
So this plan sponsor's responsibility, they can farm it out to specialty.
Almost, like right? They still have fiduciary responsibility of that decision, but when asked, isn't that a nice answer to the quiz? So, Mr. Chao, how did you make these decisions? Well, I'm really busy. I knew enough to know that I don't know all this, so I hired these guys who, that's what they do, and they've been doing it for 80 years. That's a nice answer to when the auditors or whomever try to knock on their door.
Yeah, agreed.
In all market segments too. It's a misunderstanding. And it's not just small plans. This is true in all market segments.
And so at the end of the day, the responsibility of that individual or those individuals is to safeguard the money that belongs ultimately to participants, even though while they are still working and is in a trust, it's really belong to the plan, but the plan is serving solely for the benefit of the participants and beneficiaries. So
Yeah, unlike a defined benefit plan, which is the fiscal and financial responsibility and outcome of the company, the defined contribution plan is the participants' money. It's their
Exactly.
plan, and it's a big
Exactly.
differentiation. I think is often misunderstood or overlooked in its importance.
Yeah. And we need gatekeepers. We need experts who knows how to manage those plans, either self-directed or otherwise, and that employees and beneficiaries are relying on in good faith that the money and all the related stuff is managed and is provided in two ways. One is duty of due care, which you just talked about, which is really understanding how to ask the questions that is not asked, look at the corners that's not looked at, and to give that higher standard of care. Number two is duty of loyalty, right? That we owe it not to ourselves, but to them, the owners of that, or the caretakers of that money during the accumulation years, and ultimately to the employees who leave and it's their money.
I worked at Putnam Investments back in the last century and early this century, and the prudent man rule, George Putnam, as a ship captain, as these sailors were crossing the ocean being paid, the captain had the responsibility of that fiduciary, what would be known as a fiduciary responsibility under the prudent man rule. What would you do if it was your own? And I'm thrilled that that's becoming a baseline expectation in our industry, in all market segments for all types of clients. I think that's really, we will all do very well from
Yes.
an income standpoint if we put our clients' best interest first.
And it is that we're going to spend the rest of the conversation perhaps talking about, are there conflicts out there?
Yeah.
And the idea is duty of loyalty is not put your own interest ahead of your client's interest. It's always your client's interest first. We have already kind of watered it down by say best interest. It's not best interest. It's really sole interest,
It's
right?
best interest if, with all these carve outs.
Exactly. So yeah, exactly. So I think of ERISA rule about retirement plan like a lockbox, right? And there are no holes. You can't touch it. You can't do it. I mean, the money is locked up. The only way you can have access to it is through exemptions. And so anything other than that is in a violation. So it's not enough to disclose any conflict. Oh, I'm going to make a lot of money from your money. That's not enough. You have to be very clear that there is no conflict. That's not to say that you cannot get paid for your service. That's different. But it has
Transparency
to
is the
be,
key.
yeah, it's transparent. It's beyond just disclosure.
All right.
It has to be duty of loyalty. So I think that sets us up nicely
Well,
for the rest
that
of our
kicked a whole lot of
conversation.
cans over, Philip, in our industry over the last 20 years as it relates to investment management fees, record keeping fees, dare I say, group variable annuity products that were dominant back in the day. And no one knew. It was, quote, free. No, it's not. There's money. There's money being spent, and the sponsor has that responsibility of understanding that. Is it a
They are the
fair?
keeper of your money until it's yours, distributed to you. So this keeper has a awesome
Awesome
responsibility to do the
responsibility. Fiduciary
best
role,
job
the
they can.
fiduciary role of the sponsor named in documents is a big
Yeah.
deal that I don't think they fully appreciate. Usually the
No.
best audience member in a presentation for us is an ERISA counsel.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
When they
Yes. They will
see
truly
what we
adopt.
do, like, you do all that, like, yes, we do all that. You still have responsibilities. I know that we're selecting you, but you do all that.
It's amazing.
It's a big deal.
So, and I know, and I think everybody else who is in our industry knows that the Department of Labor is again attempting to define fiduciary rule. And in this case, specifically emphasizing IRA rollover. This is something that has gone through over and over and over again. SEC has made rule, the best interest rule about rollover, and ERISA DOL is trying to come up with new rules. And I expect, and typically that's what happens. They will issue the new rule the Friday before a long weekend, and you can dump it all on us, and we're supposed to read it, and we're supposed to give public comment. It's not a very complicated idea, but of course we're going to we, the industry, makes it very complicated. The idea is when somebody retires at age 65, 67, whatever that is, that person probably has the most money in retirement assets than ever before. I mean, that is sort of the final piece, and possibly for many is the biggest check they would have ever seen in one lump sum. And hopefully it is, because that's what you save your whole life. You invested correctly and all that.
It's what we spent the last 40 years doing, right?
Exactly. So that is a moment of realization, but it's also a moment of vulnerability. And the vulnerability comes because of conflict. So I think what the DOL is trying to do is to attach the fiduciary responsibility when the decision is made or advice is given about how that money should leave the plan or not leave the plan, or where does it go. But there are commentators who says, hold on for a second, that's no longer plan sponsor's issue. This is a participant issue. The participant want to do it. So there's all these duties. What's your thought about all that? What's your thinking?
Yeah, well, it's hard not to go back to 2016 and think about where we were at that point and what was really in that legislation or attempted legislation. And, as a consultant in 2016, going to the big shops on this subject, I was somewhat amazed that they thought it was really the real big outcome was around the retirement plan and not the IRA. And it was an eye-opener for some very big shops that will remain nameless, that standard of care is the big deal here. So you've been loading up everybody up on passive target date funds at, well, now some people say they don't even charge a fee, right?
Yeah.
That standard of care has to be moved into retirement, into their IRA. And everyone's like, no, that's not. Yes, it is. It absolutely is the case. So everyone who wanted to do a 1.5% managed account just assumed that would be a no-brainer. It's a brainer, and you're going to be putting yourself as a fiduciary, because the law was going in that direction, in a really difficult spot. Yeah. So will it have that kind of teeth? I don't know. I just try to keep it really simple. We are stewards of the tax code, basically, right? That's what ERISA it was founded on. The rules are going to be the rules, and everyone, instead of trying to nuance it and work around it, work with it. We are creating amazing balances for retirement. The $1 million rollover is no longer the rare bird. It's if you use compounding to its best of its abilities, and you saved enough with a thoughtful plan that increased your savings rate, which is the biggest thing that we have to do as sponsors, you're probably ending up. Now, that said, and I'm just going to throw out basic stuff, right? The 4% rule. You have $1 million, that's $40,000 pre-tax per year. Suddenly $1 million doesn't sound like a lot of money. And a really sophisticated way to invest that or use that money is that, there the trade-offs on the use of that money and the value of the services provided starts to really be called to question.
Agreed. So I'm going to pivot a little bit, because this is a really important point, and we're going to talk a little bit about record keeping and other service providers, and then come back and say, well, maybe this is why we have all these issues potentially. Shifting gear a little bit, that like any other industry, record keeping industry, I'm going to pick on record keeper first, and then we'll deal with the other players, has seen a lot of consolidation. I mean, like any new industry, there's a lot pops up, and then some succeed, some do not. And then ultimately they need scale in order to really serve the end customer. So you end up really, a lot of industry end up having, two ends. You have the very, very large on one end, and fewer smaller one, independent one on the other end. That's typically what happens in all the different industries. You look at retail industry, that's going through that right now, particularly sped up by the Amazons of the world. But so one of the things that also accelerated, in my opinion, this consolidation is the last decade and a half of persistent pressure to lower fees. I mean, controlling plan expenses, as you know well, I don't have to preach that. Controlling plan expenses is one of the most important fiduciary responsibility because you're dealing with other people's money. You need to be very cautious, you need to be very conservative, and you need to be prudent. Because of that, the fee charged on record keeping has been coming down. But at the same time, the services that people want has been going the other way. Plus, a lot more technology built just to keep up with technology on very old, foundation, shall we say. So it's burning, there are more than two ends is burning, like 8 ends are burning on one candle. And so the easiest way for people to deal with this is let us get bigger. Once we get bigger, we have more people on it, we get more fees the fees may be down, but we get more fees to support all this stuff.
With efficiency and scale should come better revenue streams and margins. That's the premise.
In theory, right? In theory. So where do you think the destination? I mean, we end up having two companies. I mean, I won't name the two. I mean, immediately you and I know what are the two that's the biggest right now. And is that really the best for the industry by collapsing them into the biggest one or two and no ability to really look at competition, which drives not only fees, but service level, service offerings, and the relationship and all those type of things. Tell me a little bit about what you think the trend is and where we're going.
Yeah, so again, an incredible set of questions there, Philip.
I know you have the answers. That's why I asked.
No, I don't have the answers, but I do have experience, right? I have history here. So
Sure.
I've been part of 4 conversions where we either transferred the participant record keeping or the entire retirement business platform to another party. Interestingly enough, they all ended up at what became one firm.
Yes.
And that reason, and this is from big firms, right? Big investment management firms making lots of money, doing its core competency, investment management. And that was the message. Like, what are we doing over here? On a good day, maybe it's single digit margin. So that was the drive. It was a core competency drive. And to try to keep ahead of the Joneses, it was nonstop. I remember as a head of product, some of the battles that we would have about the latest bell and whistle for the RFP. If we don't have it, we're never gonna win. And then when you look at the take rate of some of these things, like self-directed brokerage, it's like single digits, and a lot of money was spent to put that feature online. While technology's been a friend because daily changed everything, and the internet and smartphones have continued that change, it also created an environment where has become a bit of a commodity too. And only the large can survive. And it's interesting to see that it's primarily the insurance companies that have the market share, that along with a very large investment manager that we all know. So not that those other investment managers aren't still involved, but they're usually involved primarily from their core competency, which is investment management and relationship management, which is a big deal here that bears a lot of conversation at some point. It's almost its own topic. That connection point with the plan sponsor and advisor client is the real currency for everybody in the business. So where's it all headed? Consolidation is going to continue. It's probably more like a dozen firms now, but they're all primarily insurance companies. There's 3 really dominant players in all the market segments. And I think maybe a better way to say this is the ultimate, not success, but the ultimate beneficiary of all this is the consumer. We were forced as investment managers, and I remember saying this in meetings, like, why are we the arbiter of the final price? Everything's playing off of our NAV. Why? Why don't we just say, here's what it costs us to manage money? And we created institutional shares, 20 years ago. And now that's the standard. And great, that's what we do. This is what it costs. And that price, because if you've got a bigger plan and you can give us $1 billion in a different discipline, we're going to give you an even better institutional structure. So that drove the price down. The transparency of that drove the price down. Advisors drove the price of that down, and the beneficiary is the plan sponsor. And now, here we are in this second half of 23. Hard to believe, racing to another selling season. Which has always been the post Labor Day push. And institutional grade services are coming to all market segments. So while this was only available to, say, the mid, large, and mega plans, suddenly now micro and small plans are offering a total benefits outsourcing at an incredibly amazing price in the grand scheme of things. And back to that earlier part of our conversation, plan sponsors are busy. That's exactly what people want. And once that's perfected, once you have a good connection to all those data points as a plan sponsor, you're not trading that off. And I think the big record keepers get that. I think that's why the consolidation will continue. It's going to change the dynamic for the investment managers, that's for sure. And also for the distributors, as they have to figure out how do they befit that model. It's no longer about changing your record keeper and going to index funds. It's a much richer conversation. Again, who benefits? The sponsors. The sponsors benefit, participants benefit. And I think that's all great. So to your points, the evolution of business cycles, the consolidation is well underway and for obvious reasons.
So part of this is record keepers always have maintained, and court cases have demonstrated, that they are not fiduciaries. But they are inching into and actually crossing over to fiduciary services. So for example, once you have a distribution system such as a record keeping service, where you have tens of thousands of participants going through and you're keeping records for maybe thousands of plan sponsors, this is a distribution system, feeding the tube with these people. And so it is natural human instinct to say, gosh, what else can I sell or provide to this group of people, like Netflix eyeballs, what other movies or what other genre or whatever, because we want to keep them, we want to make money off them. And if I'm not a fiduciary, which record keepers are not, or at least so far have continued to be not, it's fine. So there's no real conflict. So we do need folks like you and other fiduciaries to stand in the way between selling and prudence, right? Selling and what's in the best interest or sole interest of the participants. So the question now is that a lot of record keepers are entering into, you mentioned managed account earlier. They want managed account because they can create more fees for them, for their revenue, because there is a cost to providing it. And number two, they may even serve potentially as a 338, which is the discretionary manager on how to invest participant money. So they crossed over. They also want to provide investment advice for that higher end group of participants, where they will provide wealth management services, even while they're during their participant period before they leave. They are also providing consulting on other areas. Financial wellness is the big catchphrase. I know financial wellness by definition is not a fiduciary service, but it could bleed into it. So as record keepers doing that, and I'm going to link in others just for our sort of complete picture, advisors feel shafted. Oh, hold on. I am the investment guru. I am the, and I am the one who really my firm really want to tackle that, and we're willing to be fiduciary to do that. So there's not only conflict under the ERISA framework, which is really selling rather than protecting, which is exactly different things, but there's also conflict between different service providers going after the same group of people. So how do we help to remain the gatekeepers from these probably conflicted, may not be the best solutions for plans?
There's not one. The difference between accumulation and decumulation, or use in retirement, is dramatic. Accumulating wealth was almost formulaic. The biggest number, which we missed, in most parts, was the savings rate. How many times sponsors have said no to auto escalation? It makes my hair curl. When they could, but they're willing to match, just 1% to 3%. I'm like, well, why don't you just spread that to 10? It actually will financially be better for you, and you're doing the right thing for your employee. No, it's their money. They got to make. So I'm still, my biggest bugaboo of the last 40 years is that we haven't really accelerated the savings rate automatically. We put people in plans, we put them in thoughtful defaults, but the biggest thing that mattered was savings rate. I'll get off that soapbox because now we are where we are, right? The balances are what they are. Sadly, just as much as there is a high propensity of $1 million rollovers, there's also a high propensity of $100,000 60-year-olds. Now it went from $40,000 a year in the 4% rule to 4%. That's so. To your point with this potential for conflict, I think income and retirement is the thing now, right? That's what everybody. What's my number? What is? It's only $4,000 a year. Holy cow! Or it's $40,000. I better be really mindful how I spend that. It's so individualized and nuanced because of their family situation, both in the family they're in, as growing a family, or older parents, or health. I mean, it's hard to take what was a fairly homogeneous outcome and decision in establishing a plan and getting into the accumulation of wealth. Now it's individual, and people are going to have to be involved. There's going to be some element that can be robotic, or I think the bigger trend is we're going to see these big insurance companies create an income and retirement stream right from the plan, which creates another conflict, to your earlier point of the advisor feeling like, oh, what about me? And those advisors are going to have to figure that out because that's clearly going to happen, and if not already happening. And it's hard to say, and I love advisors. A lot of these are friends that I've known for 40 years. Some are doing a really good job of trying to insert wealth management into their local offices, and others are still really busy with other outcomes, like creating a better outcome for small plans in massive scale. I know a couple of firms that are just full on focused on getting that done, including the benefits of corporate insurance in running the company. The personal decision at retirement is going to be the hardest one to scale.
I think the question is, how many hats should a fiduciary wear? Right. I mean, that's a circular discussion, but
yeah.
I mean, the more hats we wear as a fiduciary, the more potential conflict that we introduce. That's number one.
Yeah. And again, unlike the pension plan, where the pensioner is at the behest of the pensioner all the way through that final pension check or beneficiary's pension check, right? That's a very different equation in the defined contribution plan.
For sure.
And the fiduciary, how much will the fiduciary allow that decision to create an income stream from the plan do they want? I know that's a decision too. I'm sure it'll be an optional choice. And I think that's ultimately the beauty of the DC plan is that it is up to the individual. The sad reality as a society, we're not really as financially literate as we should be. We think we can go out and buy that $100,000 income stream. Yeah. Well, you can't just buy it. You can't write a check for that. You got to have the money that backs up that the insurance company is willing to take the risk on you to provide you that income stream. People don't get that. Like, well, I'll just worry about that later. Well, if you don't have any money, you can't buy an income stream. I think there's a reason the insurance companies have really concentrated on getting as many plans and participants as they can. And I think, with institutional grade is coming to insurance too. We saw this at one firm that I worked at as we built an income and retirement construct off our target date fund, where they kind of figured out the math too. Like, oh yeah, you're providing us scale and volume. So instead of this price point, which we would charge retail, we can charge you this, which was a big difference. Yes. So again, I think through because of the need that we're facing and the size of the population against the need and the transparency requirements that are clear under fiduciary, broadly said under a fiduciary guidance, that's going to be helpful to the what's been helpful to the sponsor is going to be helpful to the participant. I think in the IRA space, I think you'll see an IRA fiduciary governance expectation or in plan distribution expectation.
I hope that happens. I hope that happens. I think that, again,
makes sense.
We need to be faithful to protecting the sole interests of participants who worked.
And if you live by that rule and believe that rule, you're going to do really well, because
exactly.
We've all done enrollment meetings. What's the number one question after you say, I represent my company and by law, I can't tell you what to do?
Right.
And the line forms at the end of the room, and what they all ask us.
What should I do?
What do I do? Now,
been there too many times.
Yes.
And I think that to your point about personalization, you didn't use that word, but the idea of when you're accumulating, hey, time value of money and miracle of compound interest, having the right allocation should get you there.
Yeah.
Decumulation is a totally different thing.
However,
and I think,
right to that point, what happens when you change jobs and didn't roll into the new plan, and you've got 6 balances out there? You may not even know you have 6 balances out there, which is a little concerning. But all those calculations are wrong, because you're not taking into account all. And what about your spouse? What about any inheritance that you might have, or whatever? And that's why the personal element. And I think that dare I say, it becomes more of a high net worth thing. But I think it does become a little bit more. The opportunity for the advisors is to really wire well the true financial wellness elements that many Americans are fortunate enough to experience and do it really well. And they will do really well because of that.
At the end, is go back to data, collecting data.
Yeah, it's all about the data.
Having real data, and then using the data correctly, prudently to inform decisions. Again.
And that was our decision, Philip, is, okay, do we want to try to tackle that big challenge for participants, or do we want to tackle the problems inside the plan? Because we now literally live inside these record keepers. We're getting their data. We're to the point where we can actually help evaluate the plan before a problem's known and go look for it. And that's, we feel our responsibility. If we get that right, that the downstream implication is kind of clear from a participant level.
Enormous.
Yeah, it's what you opened there with IRAs and self-interest and this cross-connect between advisors and the record keepers and the sponsors and the participants. Man, this is where we are now. Getting this right is our challenge.
It's where we are, and we need to make sure, in my opinion, that fiduciary is not I'm a pepper, you are a pepper, everybody's a pepper. That not everybody is a pepper, not because they're right or wrong. It's just that not everybody can be or should be.
No, it was easier when we were growing wealth. It's very different now as you've come to that point in your life and what you've accumulated, how you're going to use it for yourself and your family. That's a very personal decision. Very different. And also, I think it can be very confusing. I mean, if you think, like you and I think, that investing is confusing. Try figuring out your Social Security.
Yeah, exactly. So there is certainly a value an advisor, an other kind of fiduciary can add, but I think it's the creeps that they creep into other things that deviated our premise of what we are doing and how we're doing it.
Yes. So back to 2016, in advising these big firms on what to do, our suggestion was certain people are going to need your best thinking, but not everybody. And those people that do will welcome, they're probably already clients of yours. They'll welcome you to continue it in retirement. But your job now is to get that standard of care inside the plan. You put them in a target date fund, that standard of care crosses over under the old rules. Will that be the case now? And I wouldn't be surprised, depending on which administration, how this goes in 24, that would be the driving principle. And if that's the case, hey, you just put that CEO, C-suite, top executives that you know in managed accounts that are, because you understand their full life picture, and target that money for a certain time frame. Maybe even say, you know what, it's worth paying the taxes now and put it in Roth. There's so many different ways to use money when you have it. as opposed to those that are going to wake up with $100,000 balance.
And in order for that system to be grounded and to be more sustainable, is based on one word: trust.
Well, isn't that the basis of it all? Right? That's the basis of fiduciary. It's the basis of prudence. It's the basis of every relationship. It's all based off trust.
Yeah, we got to restore that trust. If it is lost, we have to restore it. We have to protect it, because that is the reason why people will say to you, "Help me." You can help them. They want your help is because they trust you.
And that, from a business standpoint, the struggle that we have is that we have these selling systems that are all based on the, 1, 2, 3, ABC, get to the close. And
exactly.
What about the client?
Exactly.
Where do they fit into this? Oh, they're just a part of the assemblage. I think that mindset needs to change more broadly, or said differently. Those that understand a more consultative, trusted advisor approach to business will do extraordinarily well in this environment, because people are looking for that someone that they can count on and trust. The sales, a rough sales guy that's always be closing thing with the elevator pitch, and I think that got blown up with the pandemic. People are going to do more business this way in the future than they are going to be. They're not going to have the time for that. Let me stop and chat with you. So the dynamic of sales, especially for the investment management space, DCIO space, and I will say more broadly, retail distribution, is totally getting centralized. And these huge teams that exist out there are very expensive. Talk about disruption. It's here. They don't even, as an old colleague used to say, the comet's hit, the dinosaurs don't know it yet. I think that's what's coming to retail and institutional distribution of investment management and the advisory space. And it's already obviously hit in the record keeping space. There are 12 players standing, and they're in all market segments. Nobody wants to wake up on a Thursday in August and change their record keeper. Once you fix that, you're probably going to keep it. And that's why the race is to the bottom, in a good way, bringing institutional grade solutions to all market segments. And what we're seeing in the micro small space is so exciting. It's like, wow, this was like a dream plan 10 years ago for a big plan. And now we're bringing it to startups and 25 employees, getting that same capability because the investments were made. And to a computer, it doesn't care if it's $1 billion, plan with 10,000 participants or a new plan with 10. It's the exact same data structure, to your point. It's all about the data.
Because of scale now. I mean, we have reached some scale, and technology is a big enhancement to that. So, Matt, I my mind is like everywhere. So thank you.
Our conversations are always like this, Philip. I love it. Thanks for the opportunity to chat, and I look forward to continuing this conversation. We are both historians and students of the industry, and I love it. I mean, this is what it's all about. We're doing something. If it isn't the top goal, it's certainly a top 3 goal of everybody that we'll never meet, but we have a chance to impact in a positive way. And it's always been the great honor of being in this business and my passion, beyond my family. It's nice to know that when I'm not with them, I'm spending time doing something that's really important. And that's obviously true for my wife as well. So it's a family affair for us.
Of course. So thank you so much for joining me and spending this time. I hope that this is not a discussion in vacuum, that there are other people who will listen to it and, like me, have learned a great deal from you and your perspective. And it's been just helpful. And we hope to continue this kind of dialogue on an ongoing basis.
So this conversation, and we just touched, I mean, IRAs alone are, one discussion, one podcast can't cure, but this is where we are. And people that have a fiduciary mindset, which you've always had, and now I can be professionally, it's so cool. This is what it takes. Think like a client, put their best interests first. You will do really, really well. And a lot of us has done really, really well in this industry by always being transparent, trying to earn the trust that's required and not violate it. And then when things go bad, be transparent with that too. And again, to your point, the future's great. So thank you for the opportunity to chat.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And we'll chat hopefully soon.
I'll look forward to it.
You can always find more episodes by visiting philipchow.us/podcast or find us on your favorite podcast app. You can always leave us feedback, ask questions, or request a topic for us to discuss by sending an email to pc@philipchow.us.
Views expressed in the Tao of Chao podcast are individual opinions, and they do not represent the employers of each guest or the firm each guest is associated. Our podcasts are for educational and informational purposes only and should not be deemed or viewed as investment advice or recommendations. Please consult your personal financial advisor, investment expert, or investment fiduciary before taking any actions about your plan and investments.